Hey everyone, it's Zach again with Policy Best. For our final installment, we're going to be talking about how Georgia's spending compares with other states. In previous sections, we've noted that Georgia's budget took a large hit during the recession and have shown on a real dollar basis, based on population growth and inflation, that the budget's 91% of what it was in 2008. During the recovery, incremental budget growth was used to shore up previous cuts in education, as well as meeting mandatory spending requirements for population growth in health care, education, and Medicaid. In this section, we compare Georgia's budget to other states, as well as areas we prioritize in our budget compared to areas prioritized by other states in our region. For the purpose of this video, we're going to be looking at fiscal year 2015 because that's the year with the most current information available. In fiscal year 2016, we currently only have the estimated revenue and expenditures for that year. So let's talk about how Georgia compares to other southeastern states. If you look at the graph to your right, you'll notice two columns with numbers on them. One for total expenditures in the state, and the other for per capita expenses. When comparing different states, it's better to look at per capita spending because it neutralizes the different populations. And if you do that, you'll notice that Georgia is near the bottom of per capita spending in the southeastern states, only above Florida. And the reason why will become very apparent in the next couple graphs. But for now, let's just remember that Florida is unique. To put Georgia's spending in perspective, let's highlight Arkansas for a second. You notice that Arkansas spends $7,600 per person. That means that Arkansas spends 78% more per person than Georgia does. The important takeaway from this chart is the bottom line taxation and spending for each state that matters is the bottom line taxes and spending per person. When policies and taxation are debated at Georgia's capital, many want to have a lower motor fuel tax like Alabama or South Carolina. They would like to have no income tax like Florida and Tennessee, and they want to keep things like Georgia's sales tax exemption on groceries. What ultimately makes Georgia competitive is the ability to fund the programs needed while keeping the overall net taxes and spending as low as possible. This chart shows that Georgia is among the lowest taxed of the region, that is the lowest taxed in the country. Now that we've looked at how much each state spends, let's look at where each state prioritizes its spending. If you look at the graph, you'll notice that spending is broken up between elementary and secondary education, higher education, public assistance, Medicaid, corrections, transportation, and other departments. Georgia spends more than any other state percentage-wise in education for K through 12. Many people who are looking for places to cut the budget often want to start with public assistance or welfare, as that's where they believe the budget fat is hiding. This very small percentage is highlighted to show that most of the programs are federal in nature, and thus beyond the reach of Georgia's legislators and state policymakers. Let's bring these percentiles into dollar amounts to get a real idea for how states prioritize their spending. The highlighted red are areas each state spends the most on. You'll notice Alabama spends the most on K through 12, and North Carolina spends the most per person on transportation and corrections. The highlighted green is especially interesting. It's the area that states pay the least in per person. You'll recall that we mentioned that Florida was unique on a previous slide, and that was why they got away with spending less per capita than Georgia. The reason why is right here. If you look at the graph, you'll see that Florida spends significantly less than Georgia on K through 12 and higher ed spending. This is because Florida's population skews much older than any other southeastern state, and this allows them to spend significantly less on the largest section of our budget. For this reason, Georgia and Florida really aren't that comparable when you want to look at the differences in state budgets. You'll also notice that Georgia pays the least per person among its neighbors in public assistance, Medicaid, and transportation as of the fiscal year 2015. Now, it's important to remember that the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor early this January said that Medicaid was underfunded in the state, and our per capita transportation expenditures have risen dramatically since the passing of HB 170 last year, where a majority of the state legislature decided that our transportation was underfunded. So now we've discussed how Georgia's budget is structured and funded, how it's cut and grown, and where we are today. We hope these videos will help explain where we have been and give you an insight into the policy decisions our policymakers need to make.